So a few days ago, we heard in the UK Parliament a Labour MP, I think his name was called Tahir Ali, who was calling for the introduction of a blasphemy law. Now, I think that this would be an absolute disaster. I did a daily video for a short video channel, and basically I said that it's going to be a disaster for three reasons. Number one, it's just a really bad violation of our right to free speech, like any hate speech law. Number two, it's going to contribute to a very arbitrary environment where people are literally afraid to speak and criticize multiculturalism. And number three, it is definitely going to be applied selectively.
It also privileges Islam as a religion in Britain. Why the hell should Islam have religious preference in Britain? It's crazy.
Well, yeah, because you would say that Britain is a
Christian country.
Is a Christian country.
The king is literally the head of the Church of England, and yet it's Islam that has legal protection, and not Christianity.
But I want to ask you, Carl, why is there no discussion of christianophobia?
Because people view Christians as like some sort of global majority, even though they're not, and therefore they can't, under the sort of woke formula of power plus prejudice, be oppressed. They're always the oppressors.
Yeah, so I want to be very clear. I'm against blasphemy laws because I'm against hate speech laws. But this segment is about something different. And actually, it's more of an introduction to a very huge topic. And obviously, we cannot talk about the persecution of Christians globally in just 20 minutes. So I want to give you just some really interesting bullet points, some statistics, and also some perspective into the mix. Right, so let's see here. Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world. Would you guess this from just looking at the culture today?
I mean, I already knew this.
You did know this.
Followed this, yeah. But I think the average person has no idea.
The average person has no idea, just like they have no idea of, for instance, the mix of the population within the country. Remember the Vox Populi.
Yeah.
Not just that, also the average person has been raised on a steady diet of liberal propaganda and Stephen King novels to assume that Christians are all insane, crazy bigots. Most of them understand Christianity is, isn't that basically like the Westboro Baptist Church? I watched the Louis Theroux documentary on that. If they're being persecuted, that's a good thing. Also, isn't it like that icky white European religion for thousands of years? Ew, let's get rid of that.
Of those people who have no culture.
Yeah, exactly. There's no culture. Ignore the glorious churches and architecture, the traditions, the rituals, the dances. No culture.
Right. So it says that Christianity is the most persecuted religion in the world. That is why the label christianophobia is common in the language of international and regional human rights bodies. Most of them often condemn together anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and Christianophobia. However, the ECHR uses only the first two labels in its case law, but has never mentioned Christianophobia as such.
Well, I can hardly say that's surprising, given that they're one of the bodies that are very much against Europe in general.
Right, and here we are going to go to the UN, because as I said also in the main segment, it seems to me that UN is basically the Organization of Virtue Signaling.
Yes.
It's VSO, I think it should be called. Yeah. Right, so Samson, could we please type Islamophobia on the search bar to see how many results we're going to have? And then we are going to compare this with Christianophobia. So if we click on this, yeah, you can click on search.
Oh.
No, yep.
Islamophobia.
Yeah, search.
Hit search, it's right above reset. There you go.
We have 17 results, and we also have number one, the International Day to Combat Islamophobia, which they have designated March 15. Now, if you write Christianophobia, you will see, how many results do you think there are going to be?
Thousands, surely.
Thousands. How many thousands?
Tens of thousands, I hope.
Yeah, sorry, no results could be found.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe type in, like, anti-Christian with a hyphen between it?
No, if you type anti-Christian, what you will see is essentially that they have a designated day to commemorate victims of acts from religion. Right?
The first thing that comes up is the Islamophobia thing.
Right. So if you see here, Antonio Gutierrez makes claims about Islamophobia in the UN. He says about this rise in bigotry about regarding Islam, but he doesn't say anything of the sort regarding Christianity. Right. So I started to a sort of a search because I wanted to give you precise data. So I tracked several organizations and went to see several websites. I came to Open Doors, which is a really eye-opening organization. It's since 1955. It was established by someone. It was founded by someone who was smuggling Bibles into the Soviet Union.
Right.
And essentially, they're saying that right now, Christianity is persecuted even more than it was in the Soviet eras, and
when
also
one of the goals of the Bolsheviks was literally to persecute Christians.
So 16 million Christians.
You will see here, it's not that they say that it has never been worse since 1955.
Right.
So it's not they're not saying this, and North Korea is still number one country that is the worst country to be a Christian. So we shouldn't try and say that communists have nothing to do with it. Right. So if
I imagine they have everything to do with it.
Yeah. So I saw some numbers. They're saying that more than 365 million Christians worldwide face persecution and discrimination. So it's around 1 in 7 Christians. Christians are around 2.4 billion. I think these are the latest estimates. So 365 million, it's quite a large number.
Yeah.
It's a huge number. So why does the UN say nothing about it? Right. So what they have here is they have a world watch list that talks about all the countries, and they have the 50 worst countries to live in for Christians. So if you see here, you go to North Korea, it's world watch number 1, and they say that it's the worst country. And they say main threat, dictatorial paranoia, communist and post-communist oppression. But if you go into basically other countries, you will see, for instance, here in Nigeria, it's number 6. You will see basically the same main threat, Islamic oppression, ethno-religious hostility. So it's a very war-torn region. And as they're saying that essentially a lot of the negative trends that happen in the last decades happen especially in sub-Saharan Africa.
Really? You can imagine.
Sorry, I saw Mexico highlighted as well, which is quite a surprise for me.
Yeah, that is a surprise. Why would
We will get there, but let us focus on some brief trends. Some bullet points. So North Korea remains number 1 for 2022. Afghanistan, I think, had the first position, but that was only. But then North Korea turned into had the gold medal of persecutions. Right. So they're saying that worldwide around 5,000 Christians were killed per year.
I mean, that seems like an underestimate to me.
Yes, there are other sites that have greater numbers. For instance, the ADF says something like 7,000, but there are many. There are thousands. And as they're saying there, that close to 90% of them are in sub-Saharan Africa, and especially they're saying in Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they are essentially, as they say, Christian communities continue to be attacked with devastating impunity by armed bandits and Islamic militants. Right. We also have militants who exploit chaos in Africa. They're saying that for several reasons, economic, political instability, they also cite climate change, fractures in governance and security across the region, makes it easy for extremists to capitalize upon that.
But this happens in places like Egypt, where the Copts are constantly under attack by Islamic mobs.
Egypt is a bit higher on the list. They have it position 38, and they also have a much larger percentage of the population. So I think the Coptic Christians are about 10%, right. And I think diachronically Egypt was one of the cases where you had coexistence between religions to a higher degree than other ones. But as you say, yes, they do say here that in Egypt things are also bad for Christians and they do face persecutions. Right. Also, there is a rise in the number of churches and destruction of public properties that have taken place in 2023. Mm-hmm. Also, they say that there is rise in surveillance in countries like China, and they are used in order to surveil and monitor religious freedoms and essentially deprive them. And they also say that there are familiar reasons in Iraq and Syria, but also autocratic governments tighten control, and it becomes much more difficult. So why does the UN not talk about it? That's one of the major questions. Because the UN is allegedly one of those organizations that is supposed to be about the United Nations. It's supposed to be about what happens in the whole world, but it seems to me that it is very much selective. And that isn't just the UN, also it's this ECHR. As we read before, they are talking about anti-Semitism, they're talking about Islamophobia, but they're not talking about Christianophobia. Right, so let's scroll down a bit. Here they're saying that, for instance, a key trend in growing violence is in sub-Saharan Africa. The region accounts for some around 90% of the estimated 5,000 believers who were killed for the faith worldwide. They say with the highest number of Christians killed in Nigeria, 400 and 180.
4,180.
4,000, yeah, so apologies, yeah, 4,000.
It's okay.
Right, and they're saying that essentially in several other countries there is Islamic extremism that is capitalizing on regional instability, and they say in places like Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Mozambique, and Somalia, military coups and other fractures in governance and security have enabled militancy to flourish. Because of their faith, Christians are affected disproportionately. Now, I want to point out one extra factor on this, because here, especially in the West, we have a lot of people who are pro-big state, pro-welfarism, and they're talking about constantly pouring funds into Africa. And a lot of people are saying that the funds that are being poured into Africa are actually funding really corrupt governments. And this is actually used against Christians here.
Yeah.
Autocratic governments are notoriously against Christians in the region, and they're using their autocracy to repress religious freedoms. Right. So if you could just visit this website and click on all of these countries and see especially
what's going on in Mexico. I'm curious.
In Mexico.
Yeah, same.
Also in Cuba, yeah.
Right. Cuba's not surprising.
Cuba's a communist country.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, John, click on that.
Yeah, I'm clicking.
Oh, does it not have its own page?
It does. It's just not loading.
Maybe if we open it on a different tab.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
World Watch number 37.
Yes.
Is it due to cartel activity? Or
Yeah, it's
something?
got to be, isn't it? Yeah, organized crime and corruption.
Yeah, organized crime, corruption, and clan oppression.
Mm.
Right, so you can
So
definitely...
like MS-13, which is an openly satanic gang, for example.
Yeah.
True.
So they're saying here also that, for instance, one of the worst countries is Nigeria, and here is from ADF, and they're saying that in the south of Nigeria, the people are predominantly Christian. In the north, they're predominantly Muslims. There is a sort of mixed belt in the middle, but they're saying that here what happens, we see two trends. One, the number of Christians rises from 36%, it goes to roughly 50% of the population, but also the persecutions are increasing in violence. And they give sort of different data here. They say that in 2022, roughly 5,000 Christians were murdered for their faith, more than the number killed in all other countries combined. For 2023, one estimate put the number of Christians targeted and killed in northern Nigeria at over 7,000. Because Nigeria is one of the most dangerous countries in the world for Christians, the persecuted face targeted violence and death from terrorist groups like Boko Haram and Muslim Funali militias. Terrorist groups like these are responsible for thousands of Christians killed every year. And essentially, I think you'll get the gist of it. Across sub-Saharan Africa,
Thank God we have open borders with Nigeria.
The number of Christians persecuted and also killed is really high. Right here, okay, we have also the Democratic Republic of Congo that was second in the number of fatalities of murders, as we said.
But
the same
isn't the DRC mainly just like a big open war zone most of the time anyway?
Sadly.
Yeah.
And the same main threat: Islamic oppression, organized corruption and crime, dictatorial paranoia, and clan oppression. So you get the idea. So it seems to me really really hypocritical of bodies and organizations like the UN that constantly say how good and sensitive they are to the plight of people worldwide, that they don't have, for instance, a Christianophobia awareness month. Personally, I'm against awareness months. I'm against hate speech laws. I don't have to say it again. I've said it again. But if we have some of them, the question arises, why don't we have the other ones?
Yeah.
Right. So we have here also what we need to say. It's also in India that this happens, for instance, and they're saying that India is also, it has a population of around 71 million Christians, but there are also bad persecutions and
extremists.
They say religious nationalism and dictatorial paranoia are some of the main threats, and it comes sometimes from Hindu nationalists and groups of the kind. So it seems to me that it is absolutely hypocritical of the UN and all these bodies talking about all kinds of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and other anti, but they're not talking about anti-Christianity. And this seems to me to be very strong evidence to suggest that Christians are oppressed, and no one is talking about it in the West. Almost no one's talking about it.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Bo's series Epochs, this time about Caesar returning to Britain. And if you want to see all the other things we're putting out, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.